All right, we are now going into the immune system, body defenses. Which has been in the news a lot with all of COVID and vaccines and all this kind of stuff, pandemic. So let's talk about how your body tries to keep itself safe. Basically, there are a lot of different things out there that would like a nice, warm, moist place with nutrients to set up camp and grow. Sounds like inside of your body, right? Inside your body is moist and lots of nutrients and it's warm. So there are lots of things, whether they are bacteria or little parasites or whatever, that would love to set up camp inside of you. And if they do, and especially if there are things that act as in more kind of a commensal way or even a mutual way. There are a variety of bacteria, even viruses, that are our friends. Not all organisms out there are our enemies. The ones that kind of make us feel bad or make us sick, we call like pathogens, pathos, suffering, they generate suffering. So what we want to do is we want to stop these things that are trying to get into our body and basically take advantage of our body for their own benefit, but at our expense. And again, not all things are, our intestines are filled with bacteria that are your friends that you actually need to stay healthy. Your skin cells actually have viruses that they use to help protect you from bad bacteria that they're trying to protect you from, right? So not everything that's a bacteria or a virus or whatever is the enemy. But then there are a number of them, and often even some of the ones that are your friends, though, if they're off balance, can become the enemy. Like you have, like in the vaginal flora, there is typically some level of candida, some yeast things that are growing there, but as long as they're really low levels, it doesn't matter. But if the balance gets off and they start really getting a huge population, then it becomes a yeast infection. It is a problem. So sometimes what's a pathogen is there are particular types of microbes and like germs that are generally just bad and do bad things and poison you or take over. Sometimes things are not pathogens unless they actually get out of balance and start overgrowing. They're normally there, but if they get too much, too high populations, they become an issue. So it gets a little tricky even deciding what is a problem, what's not a problem. It also depends on the condition of your immune system. There are a lot of things that are present in the environment that are constantly there that normally don't cause any problems at all until your immune system is weakened, and then they have more of a chance to get a foothold and actually cause problems. So that's discussions for another class, but just kind of putting that out there, that the whole idea of what is a pathogen even is a little tricky sometimes. It depends on what it is. It depends on, the conditions of your immune system. It depends on the balances with other organisms and all that. So body defenses, there are two main things: innate versus adaptive. So innate, these are the things that are just always in place to try to keep you safe from things either getting into your body in the first place, or if they do get into your body, if they don't look like they belong, to try to deal with them. It doesn't matter what the thing is particularly. This is kind of like putting up a fence around your house, or locking the door to your to your house. It doesn't care if it's this person or that person. It's just trying to keep people out. So these are called non-specific defenses. Sometimes it's just things don't look right. Things don't have the right, it's like if you have some weird lizard things trying to get in your house, like, okay, that can't be right. This has got to be something wrong. This does not look like anything that should be entering my house. So let's try to get rid of it. Adaptive, these are what we call the specific defenses. So adaptive, these are where your body has captured some kind of invader and is going to set up, using your lymphocytes, using these specialized white blood cells, set up a specific defense against a specific antigen, a specific type of thing. This would be like, the metaphor, the comparison I use is like a restraining order, right? If we wanted to just keep anybody out of the school, we could just lock the doors to the school so nobody can get in. But if we're more worried about, like, I don't know, let's say, I don't know, now this is bad. I always pick I'll pick John because John's at the top of my screen here. John has been a big problem and has been just out of line. And now there's a restraining order that he is not allowed on campus, right? So now we have like a legal paper. And if he tries coming near the campus, we call the cops and they cart him away. But it's a very specific thing. It's just about him. It's not about just people in general. It's not about locking the door. It's about, we have a very specific profile of this particular person, and it's only about them. That's what specific defenses are. We are going to have basically you're going to have some macrophage, some big eater white blood cell comes in and it sees some evil pathogen. So here's some germ coming in trying to make you sick. And the macrophage can come in and it eats it. But rather than just completely destroy it, it then has a special little thing we'll talk about, MHC2, where it presents, here it says, hey, immune system, here is this little distinguishing feature that is part of this thing I just ate. And I would like you to create a clone army of cells that are going to recognize that particular thing and take out that particular thing. Right? This is how the COVID vaccine works, is basically telling your immune system, here is a little bit of the spike protein from the COVID virus, and set up a clone army of cells that are all going to recognize that, and when it sees it, neutralize it. So that, the COVID vaccine is taking advantage of your specific immunity or adaptive defenses to create a clone army of cells that will recognize the spike virus on the coronavirus that causes COVID-19. And we're going to talk about it all in much more detail in a little bit. But that's the difference between specific immunity, which is creating kind of these clone armies of cells that recognize a very specific kind of thing, versus the innate defenses, which don't look at an exact particular profile. It might look, it might just, the skin is going to be an example of innate defenses, just like a physical barrier keeping stuff from getting in, like locking the door to your house. Or sometimes we'll talk about these toll-like receptors that just notice things that don't look right, like things that would only be on a bacteria cell, but never on a human cell. So we know this has got to be an invader here in our tissues. So we're going to start by looking at the innate defenses. There's a variety of innate defenses, and then we will continue on and get into the adaptive defenses and talk about how those work. And then there is also a conversation between the two, kind of like I just showed you actually here. These macrophages are, just part of, in general, on patrol, eating things that shouldn't be there, but then they play a role in alerting the specific immune system and saying, here is a piece of what I just caught, and let's continue this process and create a specific immune response against this thing I just ate. So there's going to be conversations between the innate and the specific immunity that we'll see. Okay. So I'm going to erase a bunch of stuff. All right. So let's talk about non-specific or innate defenses. All right, so some of them are going to be external. Right, the best way to keep you safe is just not let it get in your body in the first place, right? That's going to be the best thing, is just keep it from ever getting in your body and setting up a little beachhead that you then have to fight. So, it can be mechanical, like your skin. Like your skin are lots of layers of keratinized flakes that are just kind of this hard, scaly layer that makes it hard to just get in the first place. Mucous membranes. The things that aren't your dry skin are coated with this kind of wet stuff, often with kind of mucins are these polysaccharides that are kind of goopy and sticky, like snot, right? That is sticky. Things get stuck in it. It's like, oh, I'm going to go invade this person's body. Like, dag nabbit, I am now mired in this gooey guck. So skin is kind of more of like a hard barrier. The mucous membranes are kind of like this quicksand that you get stuck in. These are also in conjunction with chemical stuff. So like on your skin, sebum, which is kind of the oily stuff that makes your skin kind of oily, also keeps your hair kind of luxurious and flexible. It's also antimicrobial and acidic, which inhibits bacterial growth. In general, most of the bacteria that we worry about as being problems don't grow so well when the pH is lower. So by keeping the pH lower, you tend to inhibit the reproduction of kind of unfriendly bacteria. So sebum does that. Acidity in the vaginal canal, you have like these little lactobacillus that are making this lactic acid that keep the pH lower. I was talking about Candida albicans, the yeast that can cause yeast infections. Normally, it's not a problem because that acid environment in the vaginal canal keeps the reproduction of these yeasts down low, so they're there, but they're not causing an issue. But if that balance gets upset, it can happen from taking antibiotics, for instance. You take antibiotics, it kills the stuff you're trying to kill, but it also kills lots of other, there's a lot of collateral damage. It kills your friendly bacteria in the vaginal canal that are keeping the pH low. So now the yeast now have a more hospitable environment and they start overgrowing, and all of a sudden you got a yeast infection. So basically acidity in general keeps the reproduction of unfriendly microbes down. Lysozyme. This is in saliva, mucus, tears. Most of your secretions that are going to coat things on your body have this lysozyme, which is antimicrobial. It actually attacks bacterial cell walls. So, if something lands in the mucus, it's not just like, ooh, gunky, sticky. It's also like, dag nabbit, here's this thing that actually breaks down bacterial cell walls. I think I've mentioned this before in serendipity. It's another one of these cool stories about Fleming's lab, the guy who figured out penicillin also figured out lysozyme, also from one of these things where like some mucus, I think it was like some things drippings from somebody's nose landed on a slide and started lysing bacterial cells. So they're like, what's going on here? What's in my snot that is lysing bacterial cells? And they realized there is this compound your body creates and puts into its secretions that is antimicrobial. So, if a bacteria lands on your eyeball, it's going to be subjected to this stuff that is antimicrobial. It kind of keeps stuff from growing on your eyeball. So HCl, just the hydrochloric acid in your stomach, right? We talked about, the mucus that's capturing stuff in your respiratory tract, ultimately you swallow down to, the mucus escalator basically goes to the back of your throat and you swallow stuff and it drops down into your stomach, or you're chewing up food and swallowing it down into your stomach. The first thing all this stuff hits is this super acidic environment. Your stomach is around pH 2. It's really acidic there. It's not a very happy place to be a little microbe or something. It's like, right? So this is, again, kind of external chemical things that are keeping bacteria from ever getting a chance to get into your body in the first place. So these are the things trying to keep things from getting inside in the first place. Let's say it does get in. It's breached the boundary and is now inside your tissue. There's a whole bunch of things going on that are going to try to deal with things that have gotten into your body. So now we're going to talk about kind of innate internal defenses. But still innate. They're not specifically looking for one particular antigen. So phagocytosis, phagocytes. Cells that eat other cells. There's a few different kinds. There's neutrophils. These are the most common of the white blood cells. There are some of them are in your bloodstream, but they get out of your bloodstream. I talked about white blood cells leave the bloodstream and just go into your tissues. These things, if they sense there's some infection, they actually can hold on to the wall of the blood vessel, and they leave the blood vessel and go out into the tissues to fight the fight. they tend to just recognize things that wouldn't look right, right? Things that have coatings on the outside that would only be on a bacteria, but not on a human cell. So it's still non-specific. It's not like looking specifically for the coronavirus spike protein. It's just looking for something that doesn't look right, right? It's like if you're looking around the classroom and there is some weird reptilian alien that does not look like a human being at all, you're like, okay, that can't be a student. That has to be something's wrong here, right? It just does. So neutrophils, and they tend to eat stuff, and they eventually kind of just fill up with toxins and waste, and then they die themselves. A lot of the pus, like, when people have an infection and there's all that white pus, that's kind of the dead and dying neutrophils, or that's what that pus is. They've come in, done their thing, but now they have like kind of, run their course, and now they're done. There are macrophages. These are bigger cells. These are longer lived. These are more complicated. These are the ones that end up alerting the specific immune system as well. Phagocytes, I always think of more kind of the infantry. They kind of go to the front line. They fight, maybe, what is they 5 to 25 bacteria, and done. They don't live very long. They eat some stuff and then they're done. I have here macrophages. These are much longer lived. These are on patrol all over the place. These are the ones that are the dust cells in your lungs. Some of them have specific, like, I personify these cells, but I think it's not a bad way to think about it. Some of them are just on patrol all over. They just patrol the tissue spaces. Some of them have specific missions, like the dust cells that patrol in the lungs, or the Langerhans cells that patrol in the layers of the skin, or the Kupffer cells that stay and work in the liver. Other ones are more general. They're just like on patrol all through the general tissue spaces. But in all cases, they're finding things that shouldn't be there. They eat them. And typically once they eat them, they can then also alert the other white blood cells, the lymphocytes, and tell them, look what I just found, and let's create the next level of defense, this adaptive immunity against this. So we're going to meet the macrophages in more detail later when we talk about specific immunity, because they're the ones, I think about them more kind of like the officers or something. These would be kind of like the privates going to the front lines and kind of the cannon fodder. And these guys are more kind of catching things and then going up to the higher levels and alerting more and creating more kind of fancy. And they're all ultimately derived from your blood cells. But in another level, it is interesting to think about them as these kind of independent characters that are working and coordinating these really complicated things to kind of fight things in your body to keep you safe. So it's kind of weird. They are you, but then they're also kind of independent. So it's like, it's kind of fascinating to think about. Your brain is not telling them to do, they're kind of autonomous, following their own little programs and talking to each other. There's all these cells called interleukins, means between white blood cells, these kind of chemical messages. The white blood cells send all these chemical messages to each other to kind of coordinate their behavior with each other and create these different responses. And so chemical messages between white blood cells. There is a idea known as, okay, my brain is spazzing here, opsonization. Let me spell that better. There are certain things going on that will actually target things that make it easier for these phagocytes to grab them and eat them. So so for instance, when we look at why antibodies work, part of what antibodies can do is kind of help opsonize the targets. When we talk about this complement thing later, we'll talk about complement helping opsonize the target. So if I have, my target has been opsonized, so like I have some like little dude here, like rawr. If it's been opsonized, it's been kind of marked in a way that makes it tasty. My white blood cells can come in and it's like, oh, look at that. It's easier to grab onto and eat. So that's kind of what opsonization is. When I talk about opsonization as we continue, it means that there's been some process in your immune system that has marked. So it basically marks the targets and makes it easier for phagocytes to eat them. Oh, hold on, I need to. So marks the target and makes it easier for the phagocytes to eat. Heck. So, all right, so what we're gonna do is we'll finish up innate immunity. Okay, so we talked about phagocytosis. So we're doing internal right now, right? The internal stuff. So phagocytes. And we're going to talk, I'm probably not going to talk much more. The phagocytes so far that we've been talking about are the ones that are just kind of recognizing things that just shouldn't be there. And also they tend to be releasing these different signaling molecules, these interleukins that are going to talk to other white blood cells to coordinate their activity, as well as we're going to see some other things that these signaling molecules do in a few moments. Okay. Natural killer cells. NK cells. So killer cells, well, and we're going to see there's also going to be killer T cells that are part of your specific immunity. These, so I should have, when we talked about the functions of the immune system, one thing is about protecting you from pathogens, other things that can make you sick. But another thing your immune system is doing is actually protecting you from your own cells that are malfunctioning, right? What do we call it if you have one of your very own cells that actually malfunctions and starts dividing uncontrollably?
Cancer.
Cancer, right? So part of what your immune system is doing is also getting rid of your own cells that are malfunctioning, or your own cells that are so riddled with viruses that you need to just get rid of them because they are no longer going to ever be healthy, and they're just going to be a reservoir for things that are going to make you sick. So the natural killer cells are actually about not just eating things, but actually poking holes in the target and killing them that way. So a natural killer cell, I just kind of think about it, you know, he's got his little badge. It's basically got a way of poking holes. Here's like the target cell. Gets rid of the target by poking holes in it. It's not actually a little dagger. What it actually does is it inserts these little membrane proteins called perforins, which the analogy people use is kind of like staves of a barrel. Like you put them in, and as they go in, they assemble and become a tunnel, and then that tunnel is now making it so this cell can no longer control its inside and outside. So natural killer cells, they're still part of innate immunity in that they are recognizing just things that look wrong. It might be one of your own cells that is no longer functioning properly, or it might be other things that just have the wrong look on them and it can't be part of your body. But again, they work kind of fundamentally different than the phagocytes. Phagocytes eat things, natural killer things create these holes in the target using these special membrane proteins called perforins. So those are on patrol and doing their job. And again, not just getting rid of necessarily a pathogen, but maybe your own cells that are going haywire that would become a problem, right? DNA replication goes wrong all the time. You have all sorts of mechanisms that try to repair DNA if the DNA replication went wrong. And ultimately, if the cell is irrevocably damaged, you have things in your body that eliminate the problem cells. Cancer only happens if something slides underneath the radar and starts replicating out of control, and your body defenses did not see it and take care of it. So natural killer cells, let's talk about inflammation. So inflammation, you're all aware, what are the hallmarks of inflammation? Inflame, it comes from the word to like be on fire. When you have inflammation in your tissues, what are the indications? What are the features?
Heat.
There's heat. It gets hot. What else?
Swelling.
It's swelling. And it gets swollen, it's hot. What else?
Redness.
Redness. Yeah, I mean, that's the redness and the heat are kind of where this inflame comes from. And then if you've ever noticed, there's also tends to get painful. So this is stuff that is actually happening on purpose. This is not like a malfunctioning that's causing heat, swelling, redness, and pain. Your body is initiating inflammation using different kinds of molecules, like histamines. Histamines initiate inflammation. We're going to see complement, this other thing, instigates inflammation. So let's talk about what is actually happening at the level of the tissue that's causing these things and why it actually is useful. So, there's vasodilation. That's going to cause more blood flow into the area. which is going to cause that redness. Vessels become more leaky. Which is going to cause, it's actually, the vasodilation is causing kind of the redness and the heat as more blood perfuses into the area. Vessels become more leaky. That's going to cause a swelling, right? We talked about edema, fluid leaking out of the vessels into the tissue spaces between the cells is going to make things swell up. The pain comes both from kind of the pressure on pain receptors due to the swelling, as well as specific signaling molecules that actually cause pain. Let's talk about why this is actually useful if you're fighting some infection. One, by increasing the blood flow into the region, you're bringing in more of the cells and different compounds that help fight the infection. More blood cells are coming in. As the vessels become leaky, this allows, white blood cells to leave, antibodies, which we're going to talk about in more detail, to get out of the bloodstream and into the tissue where they can actually find their target. And other plasma proteins. One of the things that gets out is fibrinogen. Why does it make sense to have fibrinogen and which turns into fibrin get out into the tissue spaces where your body is fighting some infection?
To kind of close the area off and allow your all these other things to do their job without spreading infection into your bloodstream.
Yeah, exactly. So it's basically trying to contain the battle. By putting in this fibrin in the tissue, it's going to kind of wall things off. So these, whatever bacteria are growing there that you're fighting, are going to stay confined into that region. When you think about an abscess, it's basically this infection that's happening in this kind of little contained area in your tissue. But rather than just diffusing and spreading out everywhere. So having that fibrin is important to kind of contain the things there. So this inflammation is actually something that is happening on purpose to allow more blood flow into the region, allow things to get out of the blood into the tissue that are going to be able to fight the infection. So this is all actually good stuff. I mean, the bad stuff happens is if the inflammation, if it gets prolonged, can actually kind of start causing more kind of damage around the area. So often you try to kind of reduce inflammation. So ultimately, so you don't have it continuing. First, it's uncomfortable, and also if it's things maintain inflammation, they can start kind of getting damaged over the long term. But in general, inflammation is on purpose and is serving a reason. Your body's doing it on purpose to help fight things. We'll talk about things that cause inflammation as we continue on. Some things that cause inflammation are going to be, like I said, the antibodies help actually intensify inflammation. But we'll get back to that. One thing that makes inflammation happen is called complement. So complement. Complement is, even though the word seems generic, in this context, it's referring to something very specific. This is like 20 plasma proteins that activate in a cascade. So complement, it gets the name complement because it complements different aspects of your immune system. This complement cascade of proteins can get activated just because something doesn't look right, which would be like innate immunity. Complement can also get activated by the antibodies that are looking for a very specific thing, in which case it's complementing your specific immunity. So this is going to be involved in both innate immunity and specific immunity. And if it gets activated, it does three things that are going to help, fight whatever it's getting activated by. One is it intensifies inflammation. Two, it opsonizes. So when complement gets activated, then the thing that is activating it is going to get opsonized, which means now all of a sudden the phagocytes are going to notice it more easily and it'd be easier to grab and eat. Right? So if you've been opsonized, it's like, oh, damn, now I have got a target on my back for the phagocytes. So complement gets activated, the phagocytes are more likely to come in, recognize the target, and eat it. And the last thing is, just like the natural killer cells, it helps put holes in the target. It's called the membrane attack complex. Basically pokes holes in the target. So when complement gets activated, either because something doesn't look right or because it's getting activated by specific immunity with antibodies, the thing that is getting targeted is going to become tasty to the phagocytes. It's going to start getting holes opening up in its membrane. And also we have inflammation in the region intensifying, which means even more blood and blood cells are coming in to deal with whatever problem is there. So that's complement. Again, we're going to see complement again on next Tuesday when we talk more specifically about innate immunity. Because like I said, it's important for why antibodies are effective for fighting things. So that's complement. I didn't, when we were talking about inflammation, I didn't really talk about pain. Why is pain useful?
Like limit the use of whatever is inflamed so it heals better or easier.
Exactly. It's like, leave it alone, let it heal, right? That's pain. Pain in, your body has pain for a good reason. It's to avoid damage and to allow things to heal if they are damaged. It like makes you kind of, leave it alone, give it a chance. People who have these conditions where they don't feel pain, it might sound kind of cool, but it's horrible. People get hurt, they don't know when they're damaging themselves, and they keep damaging themselves even when it's not good for them, but because they don't have a feedback mechanism to know that this is damaging me. So up to a point, obviously chronic pain or excessive pain is not good, but in general, pain is actually serving a very important purpose in terms of helping you avoid tissue damage and allowing damaged tissues the chance to heal. So pain is, within reason, pain is actually doing a very important or serving a very important role in keeping your body intact and healthy. So
there's an alarming trend going on right now where women are spraying lidocaine on their feet to be able to wear heels for longer, but that's actually not, it's not sending the pain signals up to them. So they're actually going to damage their feet long term. So.
Right. So yeah, I think bad idea. Yeah, that seems like a bad idea. Yeah, usually if there's kind of normal pain, that's your body saying like, don't do that. Like, take care of me. Yeah, so yeah, no, that seems like a bad idea. All right. I've never heard of that. Yeah, no, that's kind of disturbing.
Yeah, it's scary.
Okay. Let's continue here. What else? Oh, okay. Oh, two more things here. Fever. So fever is another thing that your body does intentionally, just like inflammation is intentional. Fever is intentional. Fever is activated by signaling molecules from white blood cells. There are molecules, people call them pyrogens. So when your white blood cells are fighting some infection, they release these signaling molecules. What are they going to talk to? If you're going to try to readjust the body's temperature, what part of the brain is responsible for that?
The hypothalamus.
Exactly. So pyrogens, these molecules released by white blood cells, talk to the hypothalamus and reset your temperature and bring it up a bit. Exactly why that is useful for fighting infections, it's still different people have different hypotheses. I think it makes it harder for, they think it makes it harder for some bacteria to metabolize things that they need to do. For whatever reason, your body is doing it on purpose. In general, because your body is doing it on purpose, if you have a slight fever, the wisdom now is just let it run, because your body it's actually useful. Like, slight fevers, up around, what is it? Normal is, normal. What is normal is somewhere around this range. Normal can be a little above or below. When it gets up into like 99 or something, you have like a slight fever, but that's nothing to worry about. It's like your body doing it on purpose. Even if it gets up to 101 or 102 or something, that's more of an intense fever, but it's still, the wisdom now is not to like knock down the fever, because your body is actually doing it intentionally, and it seems to be serving some purpose in fighting whatever you're fighting. When the fever gets really high, I think it's like above 103 or something, then you start running into issues where your body has other issues holding on to basic functioning and homeostasis. So if you're starting to get really high fevers, then people try to bring them down, because really high fevers, things can start spiraling out of control, and they can be bad and dangerous. But regular fever, kind of, slight fevers are not something that they're not like a problem that you have to cure. They're actually something that are just indicative that your body is doing what it's doing to fight the infection. So just kind of putting it out there. Fever is not a breakdown of homeostasis. It's an intentional readjustment of your body's thermostat. So, unless you're getting into really high, if your fever, if you're like 104 or something, something's wrong, and you've got to try to like bring things down. So just putting that out there. Fever. Do, 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 do. All right, and then the last thing we're going to do is interferon. So interferon is basically a viral attack warning that your cells have. So I guess by a raise of hands, is there anybody who does not have a good sense of how viruses work? Does everybody have a basic idea of what viruses do and how they do their thing?
Sure.
They get you to do it for them, yeah?
Yeah, so they basically hijack your cells' machinery to replicate themselves. They make the cells replicate the viral DNA or RNA, replicate the viral protein coatings, and reassemble viruses to again spread out. You know, they're bizarre. Are they alive or not alive? Not really alive, but they sure as heck manage to replicate and cause havoc. But on their own, they're just like molecules of DNA and protein that can't do anything. They just sit there on the dish. But as soon as they manage to dock and lock into a cell and inject themselves in, all of a sudden the cell, in conjunction with the viral information, starts making new viruses. So if I am a cell and I am filled with some kind of virus, and the viruses are taking over my cell's machinery and making more and more viruses, this cell might be thinking like, it's all over for me, but you other cells in the tissue, save yourselves. So there's other cells here, and this is going to release interferons, which is actually kind of a family of signaling molecules. And it basically tells this guy it's like, oh my gosh, whoa, I've just got this message that there's viral attack in the region. I need to harden my defenses and to slow down DNA transcription and translation and all that. All the stuff that might get hijacked by some virus, I need to shut down and make sure this virus can't get a hold in me. So, you know, obviously it's, you know, going to be just for the moment, but for the moment, it's going to like shut down a lot of these basic processes that would make it vulnerable for getting hijacked by these viruses that are currently in the mix. So that's what this interferon is, or interferons are, I should say. Yeah, save yours. That's hilarious. Selves. That's there is this thing. I'll show you later. There's this funny like anime cells at work where they have like these personified white blood cells going on, crazy fighting, and it's actually relatively close to real in terms of the physiology. Plus, it's just hilarious. I mean, some of it gets a little goofy. Like there's a red blood cell that's got like a romance with this white blood cell that goes and saves her life and stuff like that. But in general, it also has a lot of really cool physiology in it. I can give you a link to that later if you want, if you have Amazon Prime. Anyway, or is it Netflix? It's on one of them. So interferons, you know, they are also given sometimes as antiviral like therapeutics because they make it protect your cells from getting infected by viruses. So that is kind of what I'm going to say for innate. There's phagocytes. And of the phagocytes, there's the neutrophils, which are more of the front line, just eating stuff and becoming pus. There's the macrophages, which are the big eaters that are going to eat stuff and also do more complicated things like present little pieces of what they ate to the specific immunity, to the lymphocytes, so you can set up secondary adaptive immunity. They also release different interleukins that talk to each other, the macrophages are releasing the things that are talking to your hypothalamus to create fever. Neutrophils also seem to release like these toxic bursts that can also help kill things around them. So they do more. We talked about inflammation, which is happening on purpose to increase blood flow, increase the transfer of stuff from your blood into the tissues to help fight things. It can get activated either through innate immunity or, as I said, through antibodies, through the complement. We talked about complement, which helps intensify inflammation, also opsonizes things, makes it easier for the phagocytes to eat them, also creates holes in the target. Natural killer cells, which also recognize things, either your own cells that are malfunctioning or things that shouldn't be there and can poke holes in them, get rid of them. Talked about fever. There are other things, but this kind of gives you a sense of these are all these kind of internal things. External, we said there's just kind of barriers like your skin, mucous membranes, and then the chemical stuff, like just kind of acidic secretions and lysozyme. So just kind of giving you an idea of the innate or general defenses. Next week, we'll talk about the specific defenses, the antibodies, the killer T cells, things like that, that are looking for that specific, for that, like I said, that little piece of whatever the macrophage ate. So any questions up to this point about all of this? Okay.